We're going to open the project Syscat. We're going to go to Jobs, and we're going to look at this Refactr CIS-CAT Assessor job. We're going to go over this pipeline, and we're going to take a look at revision number 1. So let's open that pipeline, and we'll take a look at all the different steps. Now, the first step here is just a debug step telling us that the pipeline is started. The next step is an AWS CloudFormation template inside a Subpipeline. You can navigate here to see that pipeline, but there are some conditions associated with this pipeline. vars is undefined as false, so when we ran that job, we passed an IP address in, so we already have an instance that exists. Same thing with set IP address. These two steps are essentially being skipped because we already have a virtual machine. The notify Slack message here is simply telling us that there's a job that has started. If we go to the demos channel in Slack, you can see the simple run reports. The next one here is the CIS-CAT Assessor and upload to S3. This step is a subpipeline as well. Based on the description, this step is going to run the CIS-CAT Assessor, and it's going to upload the HTML output to an S3 bucket in AWS. The following step is going to send another Slack message, and that output is going to contain the two reports generated by Syscat, a pre-report and a post-report. These two Slack messages are subpipelines. It just so happens they're the same subpipeline. All it is an Ansible playbook that performs a Slack task. We can go back to pipelines, and we can find the subpipeline that we're using here. So if we go back to this Refactr Syscat pipeline and open up revision number 1, the last step is this remediate step. This is also a subpipeline, and here we're just cloning a repository that has the Ansible playbooks. We're writing an inventory, basically telling it the IP address and username that we want to use when we do the scan. And the last step is to actually execute the playbook. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to run this job, and we're going to accept all the default values that are associated with this job. It's going to take us to the run output, and this is going to take a few minutes to complete. So now that it's completed, if you go through the steps on the left, you can select a specific step. If you click on it again, it'll show all the output. And we'll go through the different bits of output. We've got start message. We have a subpipeline to create an instance in AWS. This step was skipped because we provided an IP address. If we didn't provide an IP address, the step would be executed. The notify subpipeline. This is what notifies us in the Slack message. Set IP address is another step that was skipped because we provided an IP address. Slack message. This is a step from the notify pipeline, so you can see these steps are not executing in any particular order unless specified, so create instance was skipped, set IP address was skipped in between the subpipeline notify and the first step in the pipeline. So these things can run in a parallel fashion unless otherwise set to run in a serial fashion. CIS-CAT Assessor. This is the subpipeline that does the Syscat scan. We're writing an SSH key that's used to connect to the target machine. Here we're fetching the assessor, it's a download. Running the assessor, this step is the raw Syscat output. Get report path, this path finds the full file path on the runner's file system. And then this is a PowerShell script that uploads that file to an S3 bucket. Report step is a subpipeline. This one here sends a Slack message that includes the URL, so if we open the Slack message, we can click on this URL, and that brings us to the Syscat Benchmark Assessment Report. Next is the remediation step. Now this again is the subpipeline being started. And then there's a handful of prereq steps. Clone the repo, write an inventory file, and then run the Ansible remediation playbook. And the last line here gives you a recap of the play. You can see we had 38 settings that were okay and 0 were changed. Thank you for watching this Refactr guide. If you want to learn more, visit docs.refactr.it.